Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability, a podcast dedicated to putting the human back into humanity. And today I'm really excited to introduce you to Nick McClelland, who is a sales and growth leader at Mercer, Marsh Benefits. So good morning, Nick.
Morning, Gary.
How are you doing, sir? How are you today on this lovely Monday?
Very good, very good. It's been a nice, relaxing weekend at home and playing with the kids mainly and preparing my little one for exam week this week. Which I'm quite surprised at the age of 7 she's having to do that, but we're getting there, and it's quite nice to come into sunny London today. So yeah, all good.
Oh, awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me today, Nick. What we'd like to do as we get going, and I think we'll come back to that education point, so I think there's something in there around the future of work and how we engage people. Do you want to give a bit more background? You know, I mentioned that you work for Mercer Marsh Benefits. You know, what's your trajectory been, and you know, what are you passionate about, Nick? What brings you here today?
Goodness, I mean, I could go back a little way, Gary. I have quite a diverse background in a way, in that I didn't set out to be in the benefits world, but that's where I've ended up and have been for about the last 14, 15 years or so. I actually originally, firstly was going to be a rugby player. That was my secret ambition that I was trying to make a career of back in my early 20s, and didn't quite make it. Got quite close, but not quite there. And then at the same time, I was trying to study law. So that was sort of the default view of a boy from Belfast who needed to do something with his life. You sort of seemed to be edged towards professional services. So I ended up studying that, and then realized very quickly that definitely wasn't me. And I wouldn't enjoy that career too much. And so to be quite honest, like a lot of people, I think I kind of stumbled into the benefits world around 2005. Took a job working at Thompson's Online Benefits, which at the time was a probably 25 people startup in the sort of tech space in the employee benefits world. And I loved it. I stayed for nearly 12 years, about 11 and a half years, when the company eventually sold to Mercer. And it was a bit of mission accomplished at that point. And I decided to sort of fly out, having been the boy that grew up, wanted to be my own man somewhere else. And I ended up joining JLT for a couple of years, but just under 2 years, before Mercer came and acquired JLT for quite a large sum of money last year. And so as part of a large global multinational acquisition of the group by MMC, Marsh McClelland. And so I find myself now about 6 weeks back into Mercer's world, but probably more excited than I've ever been about the path ahead. And that's where I am today, sort of supporting the sales and growth of the organization, but probably with a strong lens and eye on the kind of health and wellness of employees for our clients. So that tends to be where I spend a lot of my time thinking about.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really interesting hearing about your background and studying law and ending up in benefits. What I'd like to ask you about, Nick, is what was it for you that made you realise that law wasn't the route for you? What was going on for you at that time?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Gary. I think in a way, I don't think I ever truly felt comfortable as I was going through both the degree and after that, which is the LPC, the sort of qualification course you need to do to become a trainee. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Probably throughout the academic stage. I mean, I never loved the academic side, I have to be honest. I was much more interested in my rugby career at that point, but I sort of muddled through and just about got through. But there was something not sitting quite right. And it probably didn't hit me until the sort of end of my course on the LPC, which is a year-long course before going into a trainee role, when I was just sort of looking around and thinking about the environment I would be in, the people I'd be working with, and going, this doesn't feel like it's really me. I don't feel like I'm that person, and I didn't, in all honesty, I didn't have a clue what that was at that time. I think I was still quite young. I didn't really understand myself at that point, but I did know deep down that as a career wasn't going to feel right. And having got to know a number of lawyers over the years, including marrying one, I'm absolutely sure I made the right decision. But it was just something that niggled at me in terms of kind of going into that environment. And actually having worked with a lot of law firms as well, I think it's quite an interesting kind of structure that those type of organizations have. I don't think they're particularly conducive to the kind of the future of work. And I think in a way, it's not unsurprising that I've ended up, yes, okay, in the benefits field, but then very much thinking about the future of work and in a lot of my day job today. I think I'm quite sort of passionate about what that means, and I'm not sure many law firms there are adhering to what I would call the kind of future in that sense. So yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it, but there was something niggling at me that didn't feel right, and I'm just glad I pushed the button, because I think I could have quite easily fallen into a 20-year career that I would have hated before something hit me quite hard in my mid-40s.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Nick. I just find it really fascinating, because I think we've all been there, haven't we? Any of our listeners right now, that moment of actually, do I trust what my body's telling me, or do I ignore it and carry on anyway? Even at that younger age. Interesting, isn't it?
It's interesting. I think that's the thing. At that younger age, I think it's really hard to know what the answer is, but at least trusting yourself that it's not the right thing. And look, my mother, who was a lawyer as well, was dismayed when I rang her to tell her that I wouldn't be pursuing a career. But equally, they backed me, and they understood that there was something niggling there. And I think having that around me was a big support to making the decision that wasn't quite right. But I won't lie, there was probably 9 months of my life back then that I really didn't know what on earth I was going to do until I landed this kind of graduate trainee role at Thomson's all those years ago.
Well, I'll tell you, I've got a bit of envy, to be honest with you, Nick. It took me 2 or 3 years ago to have any idea what I'm here to do. So
maybe I got lucky.
You speak about that you're really passionate around well-being as a particular topic, amongst other things. But I'd like just to explore that a bit with you, Nick. Is that something that you've always been passionate about? Is it something that you've learned about as you've gone through your career to date?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think if I start on the kind of personal side of it, I guess because I have that background in kind of professional, semi-professional sport, and having had a large focus, probably from the age of sort of 15 upwards, on looking after myself physically at least, I think just naturally, inherently, my identity probably has a lot to do with this, in that I think of my diet back then, my exercise regime. It was all kind of given to me and fed on a plate, but I guess that kind of formed habits at an early age. And so at a personal level, I probably had sort of quite an intense period, and then fell out of love with the whole looking after myself, probably because it was too intense during that period. And so I would say between the ages of 25 and 35, probably a good 10 years, I probably wasn't doing a lot of good things to my body. As your career takes off and you start working hard, the pub is just around the corner from the office after work. That whole aspect of not drinking on a Friday night before a rugby game suddenly didn't matter anymore. And so it didn't matter, what days of the week that was happening. And it's interesting, over the last few years, probably a few personal things around life. My wife was quite ill about 3 years ago, which is a bit of a shot in the arm. All well now, but having been through quite a rigorous treatment cycle at that point, probably triggers you into thinking about your health again. And I guess you never lose that identity. And so personally, I think, particularly in the last 12 months, I've had a real focus on thinking about, how I'm looking after myself, and how I'm thinking about things like my finances, how I focus even on my social life. And I guess that kind of coincided a lot with this sort of rise of well-being in the workplace. And if you look at sort of the way many organizations are now thinking about well-being as a kind of core offering to their employees, either through benefits or as part of their culture, they tend to be building it around things like physical wellness and around social wellness, financial wellness, and of course, mental health as well. And so I guess the kind of three nicely dovetail, me rethinking about myself in that way, but also with recognizing the sort of shift that's happening in the employee benefit space. And yeah, I guess I've been a bit vocal, social media and at various conferences in the past 12 months talking about well-being, because I don't think we're really getting it right as companies today. And I think that there is a real danger that we believe we're doing something great for our people, when in actual fact we're probably ticking a few corporate boxes and paying a bit of lip service to it. And I think there's a lot more organizations can do to really make a difference as far as their people's health is concerned, no matter which lens you look at it through, whether it's the physical, the financial, the mental, or indeed the social. So it's a fascinating time from that perspective. And I guess my personal interest in it helps me be a big advocate for it in terms of the marketplace as well.
Yeah, it's really coming through actually, Nick, as we speak, that alignment piece, that clear passion that you have for it personally and where you work, to bring that to life. And that's really coming through like energetically, which I think is really interesting.
I guess it's one of those areas that I wonder sometimes if and I guess this is sort of the kind of doubt you have about yourself sometimes, but I wonder sometimes if I'm being a bit too vocal about something that is probably quite personal to me, but at the same time, I have experience in the workplace with it, and I don't mean to be critical of organizations who are doing, good things as far as offering their employees these different initiatives, but I kind of just can't help but feel we're sort of tricking ourselves into thinking that we're suddenly going to create really healthy employees and really well-balanced employees and, whatever else, whatever way you look at it, just by putting stuff in front of them. And I think there's a little bit more to it. And that comes back to mindset, it comes back to whether people are even aware there's a problem for themselves. And I think that's the area I'm really interested to explore, and we've been sort of doing a bit of research around that in the last 12 months to probe and see where we can go with it. I'm excited about what can be done in this space, but I do think there is a big shift in both corporate attitudes and secondly, the way that we then implement ideas and strategies around well-being for people, because at the moment it feels a bit like chucking a load of mud at the wall and hoping that it sticks. And I don't think that's going to be effective. And you know what? It'll just mean that in about 5 years' time, when people suddenly wake up to that, people will turn off the budget for well-being, people will turn off the rules that have been created, and we'll be back to square one. And that's something I don't want to see happen, because looking after people is such an important part for the future of work.
God, it's like 20 things I've got to unpick with you there, Nick. I think the thing that's really jumping up to me, there's two things that are coming out for me. One is this. You spoke about organisations, in your opinion, your personal opinion, don't appear to generally be doing well-being well. I'd like to explore that a bit. And there's also a comment you made around maybe I'm being too vocal about this topic. So,
yeah.
So on the first point of view, why do you feel organisations are not doing this work? What are they doing well and what aren't they doing well based on your experience currently?
Yeah, I think it depends on the organisation. So, I do, don't get me wrong, I do see some very good examples of wellbeing initiatives, but they tend to have, the good ones tend to have something in common in my view. And this is sort of quite anecdotal from basically spending most of my time meeting clients, in the last sort of 12 to 18 months or so. The ones who are doing things well are really ingraining kind of well-being into the culture of the organisation. But there tends to be a couple of things that actually there's probably one thing that really is the common denominator between those organizations doing it well. And that seems to be that there ends up being a really senior person in the organization, typically at board level or executive level, who's had potentially an issue and is quite open and transparent about that and willing to talk to their people about it. And often that's mental health. Again, two of the best examples, very large IT business and a very large telecoms company that I've met with over the last 12 months, doing it brilliantly. But because in both instances, they had a board member who had mental health issues and was prepared to talk about it openly. And that trigger, I think, allows the organization to suddenly get the buy-in for the initiative, but doing that at a kind of significant investment level and getting it as an agenda item at the board meeting every month was kind of key. Unfortunately, not every organization is in that position. And so what you tend to find is that the guardians or gateholders for well-being in an organization is, the heads of reward, the heads of compensation and benefits, the head of HR potentially. And I mean, again, can't fault the effort, because the effort is clearly there. People are looking at what they can do for their people, whether it's financial education, whether it's free food on the desks, or yoga classes, or mindful Mondays. There's a whole range of things now, and nearly every new offering in the employee benefit arena has got wellness in its theme at the moment. But I think the trouble is, if it's done in kind of this sort of quite I wouldn't say it's not strategic. There's an element of strategy to it, but it is in the sense that people will look at financial wellness as a theme, say, for 6 months, and then they'll look at mental wellness as a theme for 6 months. It tends to get productized quite quickly. And we're guilty as an industry of looking at that, because that's where the money sits and that's how things get delivered. But unfortunately, as you productize something, I think you're diminishing the needs. And if I take something as simple as, say, financial education, nobody doubts the power that has in terms of helping people understand their finances, understanding and basically, trying to humanize the whole money piece, because of course we do our best as an industry, as the banks, as the insurance companies and so on, to put massive archaic language around it, which makes it really difficult. So there is an education piece there, which is important, but I think we missed the point that not everybody's ready to be educated, and there needs to be this kind of mindset shift that needs to happen first before you start launching every tool under the sun to kind of help your people with their finances. Because if somebody's not in the right frame of mind, they're not going to look at that. And I found out that the hard way during my degree and during my my studies, in that I wasn't in the right mindset at any point during that period, and therefore struggled with the whole education aspect. And I think it's no different now. We've got employees in the workplace today who will benefit from that because their personality and their mindset may be in a better place. But we've got a lot of people who probably aren't quite there, and yet we think by launching more and more products and things at them, we're suddenly going to achieve this miraculous financial wellness, mental wellness, physical wellness, whatever it might be. So that's the kind of general feeling of kind of corporate wellness I see. The bit about being too vocal, that's probably in my own head to a certain extent. I am a big believer that the employee benefits space needs to move on a bit. We are traditionally kind of quite insurance led. We are traditionally kind of designing things around themes in the market and around those products that are available. Flexible benefits is a really good example of that. And I delivered a webinar back in January about the death of flex. Not that it hasn't been dying for a few years, it has been, but it's still prevalent, particularly in the UK market, and it's got growing markets around the world. But yet it's exactly the same thing. It's offering a big menu of stuff for people to pick from. And actually, when you really look at it, is an organization benefiting with the things that really matter? And are the employees benefiting for the things that really matter? Sure, it might be supporting them in some areas, but there's a chronic underinvestment in the communication campaigns that sit around those. I question whether the right things are being launched or whether it's actual personal bias of the people in control of the schemes who end up positioning things they want to see for their people. It's things like that I think I've been quite vocal about, and I kind of want to see the whole industry shift on. And so that's a hard thing to do because there's a lot of people operating in this. But I think it is important. But equally, sometimes you have that questioning doubt in your head, going, Am I the only one who thinks this? Am I making this up? Am I right in thinking there's no real value for either the employee or the corporate, or is that actually too much for people? Are people going to get annoyed at me for saying that because actually their day job relies on this? But I think collectively that's something that us as an industry could do a lot more to shape in the future.
I think it's really, really powerful for me, Nick, what you're talking about, because the fact you are prepared to take your stand about what you believe in a caring, supportive, proactive way, I think it's brilliant. You're being courageous to have that conversation. And at the same time, if we've only got a handful, my words, if we've got a handful of senior leaders, we shouldn't have to have a burnout or a breakdown before people start saying, hey, let's look after our people. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I see this all over the place as well, is that I've heard this phrase, which kills me every time I hear it, Nick. What's the ROI on wellbeing? And I'm just like, I don't have much hair left already. Like when I hear comments like that, I just go, oh my God, seriously?
That's the thing that's been interesting, because in a way I have to write the kind of the business return papers for various organizations. And of course, when you're going up to a board where maybe this is a new shift for them to focus on well-being, you're getting pressure from your contacts to make sure there is an ROI figure in there. And it's so difficult to put your finger on that, because again, it doesn't tie neatly into the 12-month return that lots of organizations want. If you're talking to a PLC that's generally driven by their 12-month performance in the FTSE, for instance, it's really difficult to get the board to sign off on something that doesn't have a return within the first 12 months. Yet well-being is not something that you can shift around in that time period. You've got to have a time horizon in the future. And fundamentally, it's again, one of the things that I've been trying to get my team and the people around me within the business to think about is when they're talking to clients, okay, it's important that you've got half an eye on the costs and what the return may be, and start thinking about terms like productivity and lower absence and all of those things. Because if you don't use some of that language in your business case, you may see some blockers above the level you're talking to. But I do think there's almost a professional obligation on us now to start talking about it as like a cultural imperative for the future. And I don't think you have to look too far away and think about things like, the rise of the ethical consumer and how organizations are having to adapt to the way that people buy and consume goods now, whether it's everything from plastics through to, rebelling against certain companies because of their investment strategy or whatever it might be. It's not a big jump, and we're already starting to see that shift in the workplace and the rise of the ethical employee, in that employees are now going to have, an expectation that the company they work for does good, does the right thing. And if you sort of look at diversity and inclusion, if you look at investment strategies that organizations have, if you look at the partnerships they have and the supply chain that sits within the organization, these are all kind of obvious areas to look at as far as doing good is concerned. But of course, doing good starts at home as well. And looking after your employees is doing good, is doing the right thing, because it's the right thing to do, rather than having a return on investment figure on it. And again, if we're sort of thinking forward 10 years, 15 years, whatever the time horizon might be, and you want to be a successful business, it's not too big a jump to saying, well, the successful business in the future are going to be those companies that do good, ethical investments, etc. But fundamentally, that means also looking after their people, and not doing it because there's an ROI in it, doing it because it's the right blooming thing to do. And I think there's an obligation on people like me, and an obligation on people I work with, to start having that conversation with our clients and saying, don't lose that in the argument. Don't hide that away in the back. Be upfront with that. And if you've also got some nice figures around what you think productivity and absence might look like in the future, then all the better. But don't have just one argument. Have both, and do that as an obligation. Which I think is an interesting area to think about.
I think it's really powerful, actually, and I think for anyone that's listening to us now, let's be really crystal clear. You've got myself, who's a salesperson. You've got Nick, who's a salesperson. So we are two human beings that are not coming at it from a pure HR point of view, Nick, which I think is important to reference here. And I think what's really interesting to me, and I have these conversations myself, is we need a good business model. We need to make money. It needs to be a financially viable business. But you can be that, and it be good for people and the environment and society. And I think that's the shift that's underway, isn't it? That conscious shift to we can have it all, but we need to be intentional about it.
Massively. Look, I think sales is a fascinating area to look at from this perspective, because I've spent all my working career with sales in the title, and it's such an interesting. I mean, I'm fascinated by kind of thought leadership in the sales world as well, but I mean, I think it's in a way one of the most antiquated areas that you can come across within an organization. And again, I think that's something that needs to shift and change in the future as well, because we have been influenced so much by the past in terms of how sales leadership works, how sales management works, and that's not necessarily the best way to always get results, particularly as we see this shift in the employee and the workplace, in the consumer mindset as well. And I don't think we do a lot to help ourselves. We shy away from the term sales, because particularly in the UK, we're quite embarrassed about the word. We have all these negative connotations with the word sales and what it means. I even think that when you're on the buying end of the spectrum, you've got a negative view to it. So in the corporate world, I've come across companies who say, "Oh, well, I don't want to meet a salesperson." And I'm going, well, what if the salesperson is the most knowledgeable and insightful person who can come and talk to you about this particular thing? Pigeonholing them into that particular area is a kind of is something that I think happens all too readily. But yet, there's so many bad examples of it out there, and so many bad experiences. But I'm not surprised that people have this negative outlook to it. And so again, it comes back to kind of being vocal about it in the marketplace, and it's something that I probably shy away from a little bit more than say I would shy away from with regards to the well-being topic. In that sales, I think, needs to undergo a radical shift, and there's room now for us to really be thinking about kind of human-led sales teams within the workplace. because again, that's, you talk about the future of work. Why wouldn't you look at that in terms of a default view for how you treat a sales team? And I'm not somebody who hasn't, I've grown up in quite tough sales environments. I've been kind of seen both sides of the fence, but also I think it's about you as a leader coming out and being comfortable with who you are and whether you can run a team in that way and so on, and whether that's what you truly feel. And that's something I'm probably still getting used to and still exploring a little bit in terms of my own style and how I'm growing up with that.
It's really cool, actually. So I'll share it on here. I've only mentioned it quite recently, Nick. But so, as I say, I work in sales, and within my international sales team within the chemical industry, we intentionally started a journey at the end of 2015 to move towards a more human-centric sales approach. And without any extra headcount, without any mergers and acquisitions influence, we increased sales by 48% and gross margins by 42%. Same people, no other headcount whatsoever. By literally switching from fear-based, why doesn't this work, whose fault is it, to how do we get stuff out of the way, how do we help each other, what's getting in the way right now. Just it sounds ridiculously simple, and it is in theory, but it is a shift. Everybody, and like you said, it has to be someone at the top. In my case, my line manager said, okay, let's give this a go. I trust you, let's see what's going on, like what you're doing and what I'm doing. We've both got experiences, we've got these lovely networks around us, and I think that for me, for the future of sales, it's a network system. It's going to be how do we collaborate together. It's going to be less about how do we compete against each other. And I think that's the big shift that's coming for me, Nick.
Absolutely. I think one, that gives me a lot of faith that it's the right thing to do, because if you get 48% shift upwards, then that keeps lots of people happy. But I think it's having the determination to do that. And also, as you said, by opening the doors a little bit and collaborating with others. And I think that's the other thing that probably I probably wasn't as comfortable doing a few years ago. I think growing up in one environment for as long as I did, you can become quite insular in the way that you the way that you work, and you kind of almost have this default view, well, why would we look outside when we're doing so well ourselves, and so on. And I think that collaboration thing is definitely something I've seen massive personal benefit from, and it's widened my perspectives into key areas over the last sort of 2 years or so. Because I had the opportunity, I had 3 months off between jobs after I left Thompson's a few years ago. I had the opportunity to connect with people, and that sort of probably did set me on a different journey, because again, even the term human-centric sales, I probably wouldn't have really comprehended 2 years ago. But it's something that in the work that I'm doing within HR, the work that I'm thinking about with wellbeing, and obviously in my day job as a sales leader, it's something that I've become quite passionate about as well. And it's because of other people and the ideas that they have, and reading more and opening yourself up to that I think has set me on that kind of new journey. But I'd say I'm probably a little bit later in the stage view. And part of that is because even within our industry, it's I think it's slightly odd sales culture, and so it exists in some areas, it exists in pockets, but it's not something that everyone's particularly proud of. And even within the business, I think people will do their best to try and tone down the sales title that you have and so on, just because they're a bit embarrassed about having salespeople. So these are all things that that I think we're getting buy-in to shift and change as we are the conversations with our clients, which all in all provides me with quite an exciting time to be at work at the moment, which is why I'm enjoying it so much.
That's awesome. It's what I'm also hearing as well, though, and I think it's fascinating, again, with us both being in sales, Nick, is this, one of the metrics I use a lot is the Gallup, the Gallup engagement stats, which have been stubbornly stuck at 1 in 3 people being fully engaged for the last decade. Everyone uses that statistic. But for you and I in sales, what I find fascinating to pivot is to say, that means for these senior leaders that tend to want the ROI, how about we look at the opportunity cost of your people? So by you not engaging them and giving them the best possible environment and treating them well, you're getting 33 pence in the pound for every pound in salaries you spend every single month. So if you're spending 3 million a month on salaries, you're getting 1 million of value. And that's my really, I'm obsessed by that message right now, Nick. And that's why I'm telling everyone, because I only thought about this literally 3 months ago and just thought, hang on, let's stop trying to ROI everything and go, what could we get if we just treated people more humanely? We'd get more of the money we're already spending. What do you think to that? Would you challenge that? Would you agree with that? What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm again, probably not as advanced in the thinking of it, but I can probably draw a few parallels to things I'm thinking about myself at the moment. Often it comes down to the people themselves that are within the various teams. And I've seen this sort of probably 8 or 9 teams that I see now in this role, and sort of think about where they're going and the management of those teams, and then the individuals and performing within it. And it's really interesting. If I think about things like even just the treatment of an individual within that team, there's a person that I've worked with in the past who quite laid back, has probably been pigeonholed with the word lazy before. And I think about how that person was managed in the past and how that person was treated then. And I think, well, that was quite traditional, quite beat up mentality, kind of harsh environment, beaten up. Things aren't going well, the number's not there, etc. There's no support. It's not a coaching conversation. It's a go and get this right conversation, and yet that's the end of it. And that's not human, right? You know, people have their personalities. People have their own individualism and their own ways of working. And I know that more than anybody. And I know more. I have confidence more now in what I can and cannot do, and can communicate that to my bosses as well with a lot more confidence than I used to. But with that particular individual, you know, you flip them all around and go, if that person was just inspired by something, you know, if it was just a really kind of motivated, they're really motivated to kind of achieve, because you're setting them a kind of mission and a purpose within the environment that they're working in, and you enable them with a little bit of autonomy to kind of fly within that. Does that kind of laid back, lazy label suddenly disappear and actually they shift on? And I've seen that with a couple of people where that label's been in existence, and actually now they're top performers within an organization because they are inspired by what they're doing. But the problem is, if you beat somebody up over and over and over again, you won't get anything out. Since when has that worked? Since when does beating somebody up over and over again ever worked in terms of getting performance? Yet, if we look at, say, coaching as a kind of simple word to cover a supportive conversation, when has that not worked? You know, it's probably effective 90% of the time. I don't know the stats, but you know, if that's the case, why do we still insist on kind of the beat up mentality within, particularly the sales environment? But you can apply that across any organization, and there's lots of organizations that you hear about who have that kind of negative culture. Versus the chronic lack of investment in supporting managers and leaders with coaching and coaching conversations and helping people in that way. And I think that is a shift towards being human and recognizing that everybody's different, recognizing that everyone has their personal ways of working, and that actually leadership and management of people is more about understanding those humans and helping them within that they are. Because I, you know, fundamentally believe everybody's capable. Everybody has got, you know, the sky's the limit within their own, you know, mental capacity, if you like. But recognizing that and then recognizing how to work with that person has got to be the future, rather than going, I'm going to treat everybody in my team exactly the same way and have exactly the same types of conversations. And somehow the results look different. That person's a top performer, that person's not. It's not that surprising. And I think that, you know, we could say the same thing about well-being and personality and the personalization of that. It's the same when it comes to management. It's the same when it comes to kind of leading. But again, having the confidence to explore and have those type of conversations with everybody, not everybody's there. And I think that's something that's only really come to me in the last maybe couple of years, that you can do that and you can start to think about the person and understand them better as a human before necessarily defaulting into talk to me about your numbers, talk to me about this, rather than recognizing that might not be the best way to work with that individual. And I think that's an interesting area that I would like to sort of continue to enforce and explore within this organization as we move forward, because again, it just doesn't have that focus that I think a modern sales culture might have.
It's awesome you're doing the work you're doing though, Nick, because you know, it does take courage, you know, for you to show up and to speak as you are now on this podcast. You know, you are working for a global, you know, multinational organization. You're talking very openly about what you believe in, you know, the work you're doing. And I think you're a really good example today of where I see the future of work going, which is, why aren't we having these conversations? Because if you know, Mercer knows you're talking to people like this, you know, I think they're going to be proud of you for having these conversations. You know, you're challenging them, you're challenging your peers, you're challenging me. But the more we do that, the more we all lift up. And I think this is, again, it's trying to get to that point of collaboration over competition for me. You know, we can learn from our competitors. We don't have to sell alongside them per se, but we can learn from each other. We can network. It's not about, you know, hide behind the door, someone else is going to come and stab you. I just really see this collaboration piece being huge, Nick, for me. I really do.
But again, that collaboration aspect, again, probably, as I said, more open to it now than I maybe was in the past. And I think that comes with having a confidence and stepping out of an environment where I was sort of probably boy to man really in that period, and then having my own space and time to shape something, which was the benefit of probably me personally going to JLT, in that it was kind of a bit of a blank canvas, and so you could kind of reset the bar a little bit. And it's not too dissimilar as I joined Mercer, in that there's such a coming together of different companies as part of this big acquisition that you can kind of reset everything a bit. And I've realized that actually that's what I enjoy doing. So if I enjoy doing that, and I then have the confidence to go, this is me, this is what you get with me, and I'll talk this way, then it does make it easier for me to then appear on this today and have this conversation. It does make it easy for me to turn up at a Reba Wellbeing Congress next month and tell everybody they're paying lip service to wellbeing. It's amazing how much this confidence helps. But I guess the challenge is I might be sitting here at a more confident stage of my career, but that doesn't mean that everybody else is in that same headspace and has that same mindset. And so it's sort of simple for me in my mind at this moment to do that. But for me to give the confidence to one of my team members, for instance, to do a similar thing, for me to give confidence to a aspiring manager or an aspiring leader to take the next step up, these are all quite different conversations. And in a way, I think circumstances allowed me to build up a level of confidence in the last few years that I probably was suffering a little bit from in my last few years at Thompson's. Whereas, I have to recognize that not everybody's always in that confident state. And that comes back to mindset, and it comes back to where people are. If you default into a view that if you stand up on a stage and tell everybody everything's going to be okay and this is the way forward and so on, you might catch 20% of people on the day who happen to have a positive mindset that day, but you can completely miss the 80% of the people because that's not where everyone's at. And it's so contradictory to maybe where the message was before, or where society is at the moment. We don't exactly live in a time of joyous celebration at this moment, given everything that's going on at this stage. You can misread that, and so that's where having these sort of personal conversations with people and trying to build up that confidence is all we can do as sort of managers and leaders within the company. But it's not something that everyone feels confident about doing. I just happen to be, I think, in a space where I have that today. But talk to me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. I would have been through a period at that time where my confidence was probably at an all-time low. Bear in mind, I probably had 8-9 years on the bounce of feeling really good as a young guy going through a business. I had a real rock back, about 2014-ish time, and I wouldn't have been able to stand up in front of anybody and deliver a message in the way that I probably could today. So it's all timing and probably a bit of luck along the way, and knowing when the moment's right to start behaving that way as well. But if we can all get like that, then I think we're going to be in a better place.
I'm saying, listening to you talk, Nick, one of my favourite quotes. Some people like Branson, some don't. But one of my favourite books from his quotes from his book, The Virgin Way, was "Luck is the intersection between hard work and opportunity." And for me, the only thing on this planet that's genuine luck is winning the lottery. There's always energy, there's always intent somewhere along the line for me for opportunities to come up. And I'm the same as you. 3 years ago, I'd go as far as 3 years ago, I wouldn't be having this conversation. This podcast started 12 months ago. Didn't even know why I started the podcast. And I think it's only meeting great people like you that, we're having this conversation now. And I think we all want to grow. I genuinely believe every single one of us wants to grow and to learn and to get better. But we are coming out of a very, very restrictive sort of mindset, aren't we, of the last sort of few generations?
Yeah, I always, it's funny. I think it depends on the day as well. Like I have, and somebody who I have a lot of respect for and time for, who I worked with for a long time. I didn't know what he meant at the time. It was only later, whenever I was sort of managing people for the first time, that I kind of started to understand it. But he made a comment about me, and it was something I wasn't quite sure how to take at the time, but I sort of reflected on it and realized it was all in the best intents, which was when you're confident, Nick, and you walk into a room and you just have the ability to kind of lift people up with you for the day. you've got a bit of a swagger about you. You come in and you suddenly infect the people around you with that kind of enthusiasm. And then he went, but, oh God, where's this going, you know? And he said, but when you are having a low moment, when you're having a bad day, oh my goodness, does that get to everybody? You walk in, your shoulders are slumped, your body language is down, you know, and unfortunately, you're one of these people that when you're up, you infect, but when you're down, you infect as well. And it's something that I didn't kind of really get, because generally speaking, I'd say 80-90% of the time I'm in a reasonably good frame of mind, but there is low points. And later on, whenever I was having sort of real challenges in the first management job, I really got to understand what that meant, because trying to pick yourself up every day to kind of have that positive mindset yourself and turn up into an office environment and not kind of feel that, and therefore have your team feel that, is really, really challenging. And I didn't get it right. You know, I know that at a period of real difficulty, I was sort of back to back for quite a few months, really, really kind of on the low side of that environment. And I know it had an impact on the people around me. And it is something I've tried to work on in the last few years, because let's face it, not every day is great. You might not have a good weekend, and therefore Monday might be a bit more of a struggle. And if I can't pick myself up and be into kind of that mindset as I walk in, I know that I have this thing where other people will unfortunately or positively feed off that, depending on the mood I'm at during that day. And I guess, you know, sometimes you have to recognize that maybe it's not going to go that well that day, and that's okay, because, you know, that's being human as well. But sometimes it's better just not to be in the environment. I think that's the other thing. I had a Monday probably a month ago now, where I didn't have a great weekend. I wasn't looking forward to the week, and I knew that I wasn't going to have a good day at work. You know, just like one of those days where you just think this isn't going to be good. And I looked ahead at my diary and I thought, those are all calls. They're all calls. Do you know what? I'm very lucky. I get to work flexibly in this environment, which works really well. But I'm just going to kind of work from home today, just to try and reset myself, so that tomorrow when I go in, I can try and just, you know, pick that up again, and the mindset will hopefully shift. And if it doesn't, then I need some triggers and things like this to work on to try and get myself there. But that's maybe me being sort of overly mindful of what my position is versus others. And I guess that's a conflict for me in a way, because sometimes it should be, well, do you know what? If you are feeling like that, be open about it and come in and look low and do so. But I think in the sales world, that's trickier than others, I think, because part of your job is keeping people motivated each day. And that can be a challenge when you're not feeling particularly motivated yourself, which unfortunately, being human, there are days when I don't feel like that. So there you go.
Well, thank you so much for your honesty. I'm just for those that are listening to us, I just haven't stopped smiling as you've described all of that, because I've had this very similar thing said about me. I don't know if it's a sales thing or what, Nick, but I'd like to come back to the previous point you made, which is actually it's in the day thing. Because you're right, you know, I'm speaking about it being, you know, historic, generational. I drop between knowing intuitively, innately, that we are in the moment. It's not even daily. Like, if I come off this call now and my day turn awful, or it could be perfect. Yeah. It's literally based on what I'm telling myself in the moment. And you forget that, don't you? We sort of generalize, we stereotype, we estimate, and then actually, literally every second is a new experience, which is actually quite exciting, really.
It's true. It's true. I don't think of it like that. Maybe I you know, again, that was something that did help me through. I remember the difficult period was sort of that kind of more mindful approach and thinking about being in the moment a bit more, but recognizing in a way that every moment can shift, and one meeting can turn the day, or one phone call can turn the day. And in sales, I guess that happens all the time. If you think about one phone call saying you've lost the deal, you know, that can turn a good day into a bad day pretty quick. And again, you know, where does the responsibility as a leader lie? Do you need to kind of acknowledge that actually the loss is pretty hard, and therefore, you know, the mood then gets affected by everybody? Or is it your responsibility at that moment to kind of go, well, you know what, it's fine. Losing's human as well as winning, right? Let's learn from it. Let's see where we went wrong, and let's not try to do it again. But let's not dwell on it either, because we're into the next moment, and we're into the next day, and we're into the next week, whatever it might be. That's not necessarily the environment I grew up in. When you lost, you felt the loss. But I think again, talking about shifts in sales, I think sometimes we can dwell on things like that for far too long. And actually, if you've got a balance where the success comes more than the losses, then let's be in a constant kind of flow of celebrating that rather than beating ourselves up too much when the occasional loss comes through. As difficult as it is from a mindset perspective to take that at times, and that's something I think again when you're the person running the sales as an individual contributor and it's your personal deal, it can feel really tough. And I've been there. As a manager, as a leader of teams like that, I always wonder, just where is the line between balancing the feedback aspect and learning from it to then actually getting them moving past that quickly. And to be honest, it's a bit like you would say to people in general life, don't dwell too much in the past. There's no point in sales either. You may as well look forward, learn from it, look forward. And I've taken that more personal attitude into things over the last probably 18 months. I think to the surprise of some of my team, because they sort of seem a bit surprised that I'm not like more angry that we've lost a deal. Like, it's wasted energy, right? There's no point. Let's learn what we can, move on. Learn what we can, move on. Which I think is quite interesting as well.
Very healthy, very, very healthy. Look, as we look to start to wrap up, I want to just touch on a couple of other things, Nick. Really fascinating conversation. I noticed that you were a judge recently at the Employee Experience Awards, and I saw you put out a post saying you was really inspired. So I was interested, what sort of things were coming up for you when you were judging those awards that inspired you, Nick, out of interest?
Yeah, it's interesting, Gary. I think when you go to these days, there's so much. I mean, there was actually there was loads of awards. I was sort of in one particular area focusing on it. I guess what I just find fascinating is, do you know what I think would probably inspire me most is just the passion of the presenters on the day. Like I just, and really quite young people coming through who were being put forward by their companies. Some of them were like kind of client managers who were there on behalf of the client that was going for the award. Some of them were quite junior members of the organization that were putting themselves forward for an organizational award. And then these people were standing up in front of 5 stern-faced judges. At least I hope I wasn't too stern-faced the whole time. And then sometimes with an audience behind, because it was open session for some of them, so they could come in and watch, or other people could come in and watch. And you've got these people who are standing there passionately talking about the kind of people-based changes that their organizations have been through that are all around the employee experience, which is or people experience, whichever way you want to describe it. And that was the kind of thing that just sort of left me feeling good about the day, was that you just had all of these people talking about their companies with such passion. And that says to me that, if a person from, relatively junior account management role, kind of first job, second job, can come in and talk passionately about what that organization is doing for its people, you're probably doing some pretty good stuff. And that's a positive sign. So I think that alone was probably worth the kind of the quote by inspiration, because that's the thing that I kind of felt the most, was the passion coming through. And something that, I love seeing personally, and I like to think that I try and give out as well. I think that some of the initiatives and particularly because I was voting on the digital technology side of things. So like some of the technology that is, again, just more thoughtful than it probably has been before. I love the concept of trying to engage the person first rather than be all about the end results of the platform itself. So I think, again, in particularly in this industry, we see a lot of really good tools that do lots of good stuff, where the benefit is to the organization, the client, or the benefits to the company that sell the tech. But not a lot of thought often gets put into kind of whether the actual thing, the platform, the software, whatever it might be, will get used and enjoyed and get, have that kind of playful aspect to it, for the individual employee or user, or whatever way you want to describe it. And I think that's what excited me as well, was that the tech that's coming through is all very kind of people-centric. It's kind of got built-in kind of gamification in there. It's got built-in kind of habit aspects in there. It's all designed to get people kind of utilizing it more. And I guess if I come back to the well-being thing, those are the areas I'm really kind of focusing in on at the moment as far as tech is concerned, because if people aren't going to use it, it's kind of useless in the future. There's no point doing it. And so what I was kind of inspired by was that that's not solo thinking in my space. This was broad HR tech kind of submissions that were coming through the awards, and just some really exciting stuff happening there as well. So those are probably the two things that kind of left me feeling, you know what, we're doing some pretty good stuff, and that's a good sign for our broad people industry, if you like.
That's awesome. And I've sort of intentionally steered away from going too tech on the podcast, because obviously it's very much about, the human aspect. But I love that little segue towards the end of our chat, because I've not heard too much, Nick, I'm honest, about true human-centric sort of design with tech, because there's so much talk at the moment, isn't there, around bias in AI and all these things. If you've got a suite of white males designing the tech, you're more likely to end up with sort of biased tech. So I guess there's still a lot going on, but it's great to hear that there is some of this human-centered tech coming.
I think there's this thing here about when we're developing anything, whatever business you're in, it doesn't matter whether you're in a employee benefits business like myself, or but the future we know will surround, technology will always surround us. We know it's there, right? It's not going to go away. But one of the things I think helps is that when you're developing something, when you're designing something, is to get as many diverse views on it as you possibly can. I think what we're all guilty of is looking within the four walls of the business we work within, where there are some brilliant ideas and brilliant minds. So therefore, why would we need to go outside to kind of think through what this product might be engineered like, or designed like, or the UX might look like? And I think it's a mistake, because actually, when you bring in a diverse perspective on anything, it can only enhance it. It can only give you something to think about. And it may just even be planting one single seed that may turn into something much bigger. And I've had that experience myself over the last 9 months or so in designing something where, I had a framework I'd mapped out and done some things, and used a little tool online to kind of work out what things about. And in my head, it looked great. In my head, it's sort of, this is going to be really game changing. And then I showed it to somebody who came from a completely different perspective and came from a completely different place. And they were the ones who said, hey, you need to focus in on the person who's going to use this, not on what you're trying to achieve for your company, what you're trying to achieve for the client, which ultimately is a corporate in my world. Think about whether the person is going to really engage with, and whether it does something for them. And I let them loose on it a bit. And trust me, it's a lot better as a result of that. So I think diverse perspectives I could apply to anything, and I think it's something that comes back to your point from earlier on. When you collaborate, and you don't just do it within your industry, you don't just do it within your business. When you bring in outside perspectives, it can only enhance what you're trying to do, which I think is a exciting place to be in as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing. Oh my God, I've realised we had one of those wonderful chats that sort of run on towards 45, 50 minutes. So I hope the listeners are still with us, because it's an awesome conversation for me, selfishly. So I do want to give you I want to give you the last shout out though, because I know from your background you did a wonderful thing of co-founding a charity, or Ride to Recovery. So I want to give you the opportunity for the listeners maybe to learn a little bit about that, in case it's something they might be able to support as you go forward, Nick.
That's very kind of you, Gary. I do appreciate that, and completely unexpected. Ride Recovery, in a nutshell, is something that's about 10 years old this year. It's a cycling event that we did in 2009 as a result of a pretty tragic event, which happened to my best mate's brother. My best mate's brother was paralysed in an unprovoked attack in London, unfortunately, and pretty grim circumstances. But it's led to something reasonably positive at the back of it. So we have done 3 journeys so far. London to the Alps, we then did, that was 2009, we did the Alps in 2012, the Pyrenees in 2013. And this year I am taking, along with my friend, 47 people from Innsbruck across the Italian Alps, the Swiss Alps, and the French Alps back to Morzine near Geneva in 6 days, climbing about 20,000 meters, doing about 850 kilometers, and hoping to raise a lot more money for charity. We're currently on about 360,000 raised so far through the events. We'd dearly love to kind of get up towards the £500,000 mark this year, which would be brilliant. So it's ridetorecovery.org is the website, and that's the details that will be available. If you follow me on social media, I'll be probably talking about it a lot in the next few months. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's something I'm very passionate about. Again, probably ties into my personal well-being journey, but also I just think it's a great thing to see 47 people arrive on top of a mountain after 6 days of really hard work, and look at their faces and the smiles and sometimes the tears as they drink that first sip of beer. So that's what's going to be driving me on for the next 6 months. And thank you for giving me the time to shout it out. Much appreciated.
Not at all. I just think it's stunning. Just think it's a really stunning thing to do, Nick, over and above your day job and the busy lives you'll lead. So thank you for doing it. So you mentioned about that particular website. You mentioned social media. How can people contact you? What other ways? LinkedIn, etc. What's the best way to follow up?
Yeah, probably. So I'm on Twitter, which is @Nick_McClelland. I'm on, or you can also follow the Ride to Recovery account itself, which is @Ride to Recovery with the number 2. And I'm on LinkedIn, which I'm easy to find because I'm probably one of the few Nick McClellands around. It's not that common a name. And that's probably the best. So yeah, if you go through one of those channels, you'll be able to network with me, and I'd love to hear from more people, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure all of those contact details are in the show notes of the podcast, Nick, and thanks so much for your time today. Have a great day.
Pleasure. Thanks, Gary. Cheers.
Bye-bye.